This is the Spiritual Genius Show, the #1 podcast for unlocking more of your spiritual genius so you can really have it all. Get ready to discover timeless strategies and secrets you can use. You'll also hear from world-class entrepreneurs, leaders, athletes, and celebrities sharing how they've tapped into their spiritual genius, along with how you can do the same. Without further ado, here's your host, Yakov Smart.
In this episode, we're going to redefine what it means to be more abundant, and we're going to explore the aligned path to becoming more abundant in your life. Now, this is something that's going to be relevant to you regardless of where you are on your journey. And as you've noticed, being here on the show, we are picking up steam. I appreciate all the 5-star reviews that are continuing to come in. If you haven't done so yet, it would really mean a lot if you left a 5-star review. That way this gets in front of more people and we spread the message of what we're talking about here on the Spiritual Genius Show. I am grateful to have you along for the ride. And today's topic is something that's going to be relevant to you no matter where you are on the journey. I think this is as spiritual as a topic as we could have here on the show. It doesn't just apply to business, doesn't just apply to career. This applies to the embodiment. This applies to how you're showing up in the world. So when it comes to becoming more abundant, right? Because we hear that word a lot. Oh yeah, abundance. Oh yeah, abundance is awesome. Or so they say. But a lot of people's actions, a lot of people's paradigms around abundance aren't quite aligned, okay? It's one of those things, if we look at the dictionary definition of abundance, right, and being abundant, and actually before we do that, I'll share this with you. If you notice that maybe I sound a little different or the energy's a little different today than it is on most shows, that's because I'm recording this from an actual podcast studio. So it's really cool. I'm looking out at all these different show graphics, kind of a really cool environment here. And I was supposed to have a guest on today, couldn't make it, had something come up. And so here I am making the most of the moment. And part of being abundant is being able to make the most of the moment and understand where the energy is flowing, understand where you can take the circumstances and either tweak them, refine your energy, identity, strategy like we talk about, or find the gift, right? There's something very abundant in being able to do that as well. Now, it is a little distracting here. There's people walking around, outside, and sometimes the squirrel brain plays little tricks. But here we are talking about abundance. This is going to be, as the kids would say, a banger. So when it comes to the dictionary definition of being abundant, let's talk about what it actually means. Because a lot of people talk about this, but who's to say what abundance really is, right? So the dictionary definition, if you look it up, tells us that being abundant means existing or being available in large quantities, i.e. plentiful, right? Or having plenty of something. Now notice this doesn't have anything to do directly with money, right? It's not where we're talking about, okay, being abundant means having lots of money or getting rich or being wealthy. They don't necessarily go hand in hand, although they can. And I'm going to share with you my perspective on abundance because it's shifted in the past few years. I'd say even in the past few months, just like understanding this at its essence, understanding it energetically, and also talk about this concept of abundanceology that I've developed and why it's so important for business owners and also not just in our businesses and our craft, but in our lives here as well. So here are the areas to be abundant in. I believe these are the areas, if we're measuring someone's levels of abundance, these are the areas that we want to measure. The first area is wealth, okay? Now, wealth definitely has its nuances, right? We can have wealth when it comes to liquid cash. We can have wealth when it comes to assets. We can have wealth when it comes to income and cash flow. And wealth ultimately comes down, I believe, to a combination of these things, right? The next one is time. Okay, well, how can you be abundant in time if there's 24 hours in the day? Well, I believe a lot of this has to do with the freedom that you have to express your time and how you spend and how you invest your time, as opposed to trading time, feeling like you're sacrificing time or you're on a hamster wheel, you're not really getting to where you want to go. Okay, so that time freedom and also the freedom to have quality time doing things that you actually want to do with people who you actually want to spend it with. The next area is experiences. What you're experiencing, having an abundant experience doesn't have to be necessarily spending a lot of money on something or going to a luxurious place, although that can fit the mold. What we're talking about is having experiences. You could go outside for a walk in the park and take a breath of air, and that could be an abundant experience. Okay. The next area is health, being abundant in health, feeling good, feeling vibrant, looking good, right? These are all things that can be abundant. And then finally, relationships. Okay, a relationship that you have first and foremost with yourself, understanding yourself, how you feel about yourself. Are you giving yourself quality time? Okay, the relationship with higher self, the relationship with source energy, right? We talk about spiritual genius as being three things, right? Connection to source, connecting to self, and connection to spiritual code. And all three are important. So when we say relationships, it's also relating to others. This one took me more than a decade to figure out. And I think a lot of people have been in this position before where, we think that spiritual growth, personal development, any type of ascension happens in solitude. And it definitely can. Definitely a time and a place. Over the past few years, I've done a lot of traveling inward, right? Self-discovery, self-reflection, learning tools to move energy, to ascend, to raise my consciousness, a lot of the things that we talk about here. And at the same time, other people, whether it's triggering or not triggering sometimes, can be a catalyst. And that's really, really important to understand because most of us, we have our journey, our abundance, in some way or another comes in relation with other people, other human beings, right? That's a really important thing to realize and to assess. And so if we look at the word abundance energetically, if we look at what it means to be abundant and we look at that energetically, we have to start with love versus fear. Right? Now, you've probably heard this before. It's this foundational concept. There's love and there's fear, and they're opposites. And at the end of the day, being abundant, if we were to really boil it down, is more love. Okay? Having more love, being more loving, having more love in all those relationships that we talked about, amplifying it. And it's not a dichotomy. It's not a matter of, you either love this or you hate it, or you love yourself or you don't, or you're intentional and confident or you're not. It's layers and layers and layers to it, right? It's more of a scale. It's more like, okay, where are you at on that scale, 1 through 10 or 1 through 100, okay? And it keeps going. So if someone tells you, and this cracks me up, if someone were to say, oh yeah, I'm enlightened, an enlightened person would never say that, right? Or if someone says they're completely perfect or they've figured it all out, BS, no such thing. Whether it's in their craft, their business, their relationships, who they are, their spirituality, all these different things. Someone may have the answer. Someone may be very confident and be very advanced in a specific thing and be a master of something, which is really, really powerful. And at the same time, even that person, if they're here on planet Earth, there's still more levels to their development. And so this word abundant, I want you to take a moment, and when I say the word abundant, when you think of yourself as abundant, I want you to, if you're listening to this, take a moment, take a deep breath with me. Feel into that. What's that next level of abundance for you? What if you were just a notch above more abundant? Okay, what would that look like in your wealth? What would that look like in the way that you invested your time? What would that look like in your experiences? What would that look like in your health, how you took care of yourself? What would that look like in your relationships? Because what we're talking about at the end of the day, and this sounds so simple, and almost when I say it like this, it almost sounds like it's a little bit airy-fairy, right? And I want to make sure that this is very much concrete and understandable, relatable, but the simple answer comes back to more love, right? If we were to really simplify it. Want something to be more abundant, give it more love, give it more attention, okay? Without trying, without forcing, without trying to make it into something, right? It's a more relaxed kind of love, right? If you ever sat with someone and they've just been completely present with you without trying, though, they've just been there with you, right? Sometimes we have to give that to ourselves. And so abundance carries a certain confidence, right? If someone is extremely abundant in an area, right? If you've met someone who is ultra wealthy, I'm talking about tens of millions, not billions of dollars, right? You talk to them about money or business or investing at times, there is a confidence there, huh? And we have an episode back a few episodes ago called The Secret Code to More Confidence. And if you haven't listened to that one, highly recommend. And that episode, we were talking about more confidence. The reality is that confidence comes from within, and it's a combination of three things, right? There's assertiveness, there's relaxation, there's playfulness. It's not a serious energy. It's not heavy. I believe higher energy is lighter energy, right? So ironically, if being more abundant is being more loving, and if abundance is more love, it's ironic that sometimes people reject abundance or look at abundance as a negative thing or something that's not spiritual. So let's talk about wealth building. Let's talk about money for an example, right? There's people who are in the spiritual world who are anti-money or who say, well, I don't need money. I don't care about money. I don't want to be materialistic, right? Well, it's not being materialistic. It's understanding that it's just abundance. It's just a sign of an energetic investment in love. Thinking that being abundant is not spiritual or is somehow wrong or can't be done at a high energy level is actually being in scarcity. So I want to share just a little more about my journeys in each of these areas and a couple of these shifts that I've had towards more abundance. Now, as I'm recording this, I'm not saying I'm the richest man in the world. I'm not saying I have unlimited abundance, at least in the 3D right now, in every area, right? And that's okay, right? We got to start with where we're at. And what I am saying, though, considerably more abundant, energetically, and in the 3D with where I was months ago, years ago, and it keeps growing. And I believe abundance, being abundant, especially in a business or in any area, actually, I believe the compound effect is possible, right? Because a lot of people talk about this aspect of linear growth. Okay, 1 + 1 + 1 + 1. And yes, at the same time, I believe when we are energetically aligned, when there's a flow, when there's an intentionality, when we're really giving love and we're playing by the spiritual code, right? We're understanding the energetics, we're understanding the spiritual principles, we're considering the energy, the identity, and the strategy behind something. Then we have a chance for exponential growth, right? If you remember in school, the little exponents, right? 2 to the 4th power isn't 8. 2 to the 4th power is, if I can remember, 16, right? So understanding, and this is something that needs to be talked about more, right? This exponential growth, exponential leaps in abundance in being more abundant is possible in your business, every area of your life. The key, I believe, is in aligning energy, identity, and strategy and looking at through the lens of you, looking at it through who you truly are, right? In episode 2, we talk about how to know yourself. And so for me, I'll share a couple of things that have really, really stuck out, really made a difference, okay? So in the area of wealth, it took me a while, right? Because I am an action taker, always have been. Taking action wasn't an issue. I was willing. The problem was, it took me a while to understand this idea of building assets, right? Now, building assets doesn't mean I have to go build a house or build a real estate development necessarily, okay? Building an asset can be building an asset online. Let's say you build an online community. Now you have an asset that when you give value, you can extract value from, right? It's the online version of farming, right? It's the saying of you reap what you sow, right? Reaping and sowing, okay? So building assets, skills can be assets, right? Because if you have a skill in something that's valuable, no one's going to take it away, right? They can take away things in the 3D, but a skill set is going to be a skill set as long as you're operating that energy, right? And what I've started doing recently in every area, and this has been a paradigm shift for me in terms of being more masterful, is when something's working well, right? Or when something's not working so well, and I think about what's worked well for me, I start coming up with an operating system. And what I'll do now is I'll put it on a Google document. So for example, Several weeks ago, I had a cold, right? And so, I don't get them often, but when I've had colds, I've learned what's optimized for me. I've learned what works really well for me, where a cold in the past would have taken me several days, and now literally overnight it can be gone, right? And so I have an operating system. Okay, how am I going to nourish my body? What am I not going to do? Okay, what works well for me? And I think we all have these intricate operating systems in our lives, our businesses, that once we understand, once we're conscious of, we continue refining. And that's where it's setting ourselves up the right way, right? That's where we have more of that exponential growth possibility. So when it comes to time, okay, this is a big one, right? When it comes to managing time and having that time freedom. This is the concept, and there's a book, I believe it's called The Big Leap. I might have mentioned this on the show, Hendricks. He talks about this idea of the zone of genius and how important, how valuable, how much more abundant it is to spend time in the zone of genius. And I think a lot of us in business and in life, sometimes we do things because things are quote unquote hard or uncomfortable, when in reality, those things are not in our zone of genius. They're not even in our zone of excellence. And if we suck at something, if we're not good at something, sometimes it makes no sense to get better. So for example, in my life right now, cooking, I don't want to invest the time, take the time to cook, right? I don't enjoy it. I enjoy eating food, but it's not something that I want to craft and get good at. And I'm good with that. Okay. Could I, if I invested time, energy, resources? Sure. Do I want to? No, because it comes at an opportunity cost. And so sometimes we think about time and like having free time, and I hate the saying time to kill. I think that's disrespectful and not abundant to being abundant when it comes to time. So with time, there's the opportunity cost, right? If I spend an hour cooking, I could have been recording the show, right? Think about the seismic ripple effect of that. That's where things really go exponential. Experiences. Okay. Having that variety of experiences, doing new things, right? I make an effort these days to go to new restaurants, explore new places. There's a lot to see. And what I've noticed recently is there's a lot that's hidden in plain sight, right? A lot that you probably have spots in your backyard or within miles of where you live that you've never been to before that you would absolutely love, that would inspire you beyond belief. Even places online, websites, content, all these different things. It's available. It's just shifting your energy, and you start shifting, you start seeing different possibilities. And we talk about health, being more abundant. How are you taking care of your body, right? Food choices. To me, also the gym, I realized that for me, being abundant was, if I want to, this goes back to time, if I want to work out in 15 minutes instead of 50, it's available, right? And it can be more intense. It can be deeper, right? So for me, a paradigm shift as I've gotten older and wiser, or younger and wiser, as I'll say, what I've recognized is I'd rather go deep than go narrow, right? So I'd rather go deep on a few things than go narrow on several things. And then relationships. Okay. Understanding there's great people out there, great people all around. It's a reflection of who you are. It's a reflection of who you're being, right? It can be so abundant. And again, like the way that I see it, I don't need millions of close relationships, right? Just more of that inner circle, right? And having different connections, different contexts, right? Being open as well. There's a lot to unpack there. So different episode, different time, perhaps. So let's talk about how do we prioritize these things, right? I think the idea of prioritizing is outdated. I actually think the idea of prioritizing can be important. I think it can also come from scarcity. And there lies the issue. And you've probably heard the saying, it's not an or world, it's an and world. So what does that mean? So if you'd like to experience something, but you think that it needs a sacrifice or a compromise, there's typically a path where you can have both, typically. Okay, now sometimes something has to be destroyed for the other thing to be created, and that's fine, but the other thing still exists, it's just in a destroyed form, okay? And so when it comes to what's important to you, where do you want to be more abundant this year, this month, this day, okay? It's a choice we can make. It's a choice that we can flip in this switch of a moment if we need to, okay? And so this is a concept that I heard about recently, actually, from Tony Robbins, who, he's one of the OGs, very mainstream in the world of personal development. But I've got this picture on my phone, and want to make sure I give you the exact framework. So there's a framework that he's big on. Apparently, he teaches at all his events, and it's these 6 human needs. Okay, and I'll read these out to you. So certainty, that means assurance. You can avoid pain and gain pleasure. Safety, security. Okay, that's all in one. That's certainty. There's uncertainty and variety. I think of it as adventure, new stimuli. Significance, okay, that means feeling unique, feeling special, needed, important, independent. Connection and love, that's feeling closeness, union, love with someone or something. Growth, expansion of capacity, capability, understanding. Contribution, a sense of service and focus on helping, giving to, and supporting others. Okay, so these 6 human needs. So what I've started doing recently is saying, wait a minute, let me review my day. Okay, I'll typically in the morning review the previous day, just like real quick version. I'll write down any noticeable lessons, any noticeable gains, shifts that day. And now what I'm doing is I'm ranking, and I have a simple scale. It's low, mid, or high, or somewhere in between, right? Looking at all those needs. And this is something, and I'll give you an inside look here. It's something that I wasn't aware of until very recently. For me, that need for adventure, variety, stimuli, right? And I like to think of myself as a pretty grounded dude, someone who's pretty centered and still a lot of the times and has that calm type of presence. And at the same time, that one is so important for me. Right? Probably important for you too. And I used to judge it a little bit. I used to tell myself, I don't need that. Why can't I just be satisfied from within? I can be at the same time. Want to experience things, right? Having adventures, being stimulated. To me, freedom is a big part of that. And so I noticed this is something that I would do in my 20s, and now it's just become apparent. I just kind of laugh at it. I noticed I would take that need away from myself, and then I would rebel and just do dumb stuff. Nothing too crazy. Some people stand up, but I would just do dumb stuff, right? And then lose focus for days or weeks at a time, and it would set me back, right? And so understanding, if you were to rank them, where would they be for you? And now I can say, okay, if I haven't really fulfilled that need or ensure that need gets fulfilled that day, if it's been a few days since that need was highly fulfilled, it's time to address that, making that more of a priority that day, okay? To me, that's the closest thing to balance, right? I think balance is a little bit of, again, rooted in scarcity. I think harmony and balance are 2 different things. I think you can harmonize without having that balance. I think each thing, ideally, each aspect, each of these abundant aspects feed off each other as opposed to getting each other's way, right? I feel like that's really playing this game at a high level.
If you're looking for more clarity right now, whether that's in your business, career, relationships, or any other area of your life, I've recorded a short training you can use to find more clarity, spiritual genius style. This training is my gift to you for being a listener of the show. To access it, all you have to do is go to spiritualgenius.org/gift. Once again, that's spiritualgenius.org/gift. Now back to the show.
And so, looking at things in terms of business, right, which we talk about from time to time on the show. I used to have a saying in our community, and the saying was give, 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 ask, ask, ask. And it sounds good, right? You got to give, but you also got to ask, right? Well, there's a more abundant way to look at it. What I understand, and sometimes to remind myself, because this is so different than what we're taught in society. Okay, but think of it this way. If I make you an offer, if I ask you to do something, okay, not only am I saying and giving you the opportunity to make a decision, but I'm also giving you an opportunity. I'm giving you an opportunity to increase your energy, to make your life better, right? Making you an offer to make a decision for yourself, right? To change a trajectory possibly, right? So if I were to say right now, hey, I've got something coming up. It's going to be $1,000. Here's the link. Go register. Told you about the value, pitched it to you. That's making an offer. Am I making an ask or am I making a give? It's give. If it's valuable to you, if I believe there's perceived value, then it's a give. And I got to share that with you, right? Imagine there was a man or a woman and they were a billionaire and they were on a mission to give away $10 million. And they were walking around town with $10 million checks. And they went up to you with $1 million check. And all of a sudden, you just kind of were awkward or ran away or told them they were creepy or shamed them for it, they probably laugh at you. They just probably think you're ridiculous, right? It would be rooted in scarcity. So people that are averse to having offers made to them, right? Now, you don't have to be clumsy about it. You want to make it appropriately. They're setting things up. It's all very important stuff. But at the end of the day, not making offers is holding yourself back, right? And oftentimes that's rooted in scarcity. Okay. Another thing that I've been realizing recently is constraints often lead to more abundance. What does that mean, right? Isn't abundance having unlimited choices? Well, there's a book out there. It's called The Paradox of Choice. No, I haven't read it. I've heard of it. If I explain it to you, go read it if you feel inspired to. But basically what it says is if you go to a restaurant and there's too many options on a menu, it almost takes away from your experience, right? It adds stress and it makes it harder to make a great decision, okay? That's why simplifying options, you've heard the saying, confused mind doesn't do what? Buy, right? And so it's having filters, it's having litmus tests that, by the way, are pre-established. You don't come up with your litmus test in the moment. The key with litmus tests is your litmus tests have to be pre-established, right? Things that you've thought about consciously or subconsciously. Ideally, you've listed it down. You have your litmus tests. You have your filters, right? Let's say, for example, on the nutrition side, let's just say that you're not going to be eating bread or gluten, right? And then you go out to eat and you look at a menu and you see a pizza that's nice and glutinous and breaded. And you don't have to decide not to have the pizza. You've decided beforehand, okay? And so a lot of people in spirituality want to talk about impact, right? The I word, I call it. Okay. Impact requires structure. It requires having filters. It requires saying no. It requires structure on a number of levels. I believe having true flow requires a decent amount of structure. Okay. And I also believe at certain levels of consciousness, it may not, right? At certain levels of consciousness, maybe you're out in the woods for a few days just doing your thing, or like you set yourself up to where you don't need that structure, but ironically, that's a different structure unto itself. So when it comes to business, I believe it's a tool to be more abundant in every area. I believe that's one of the beautiful things about being an entrepreneur, starting your own business, honing in on your own craft. And when it comes to relationships, whether it's romantic, friendships, people you're doing business with, I think a great litmus test is, does it encourage you to be more abundant? In which areas? Because I believe the best relationships, the most abundant relationships, let me say it like this, are the ones that encourage abundance in every area. That not only inspire abundance, but through that person's essence, through being around that person, sharing experiences with that person, you step into living in a more abundant way. Okay. And that's where, something that I've been working on, something that I'm still in the process of creating and putting out there, the Abundant Alliance, right? Putting a group of entrepreneurs, high achievers together to experience more abundance, to become more abundant. That's a really, really big thing. And once again, I want to leave you with this, right? 'Cause this is something that can be a triggering topic to some people. To be clear, when we say become more abundant, we say how to be more abundant, we're talking about all of these areas, not just one, not two, all of these areas, because that's available and there's no reason to sell yourself short. So it's wealth, time, experiences, health, and relationships. Again, that's wealth, time, experiences, health, and relationships. So with that, appreciate you being here. As always, if the show made an impact, if you got one or two new ideas, share it with a friend. We'll see you next time. And remember, your spiritual genius awaits.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Spiritual Genius Show. Remember to subscribe and leave a 5-star review. When you email a screenshot of your review to info@spiritualgenius.org, we'll send you access to a special training on unlocking more of your spiritual genius in your business or career. Once again, the email address to send that screenshot of your review to is info@spiritualgenius.org. And remember, as always, the content of this episode and every other episode of this show are for entertainment purposes only. No solicitations are being made of the audience. And this show is not in any way intended to provide or be a substitute for any medical, legal, or financial advice. It is strongly recommended that you consult with a licensed professional before making any and all decisions around these matters. Till next time, Stay well and remember that your spiritual genius awaits.